Fitu taki maupim ho kainga aki ho ave e topa prepaid bundle pe talafi salini e ahoni.
Nearly gave me a heart attack when you said you're doing well. It's all I had, and that's just been like hell. Guess I'm only thinking that you ain't rest, but I never thought you'd forget me so fast.
I'm always for you.
Marhaba, assalamu alaikum, malo elelei, malo elau mariho eiki mo lelei ai tonga solo mo i vulanko toa tare tale leiki mo tolu ke World Expo wa pe ma wanoa wa tahanga tonu pe nei heni mei tiu pai ia pule anga whakatataha ko Alepea United Arab Emirates mau fia ke vahe mo tolu i he weekendi ai ngai polokalama maarie me ngai whare ke kehe e te au himunga fulu maua o nau kau mai ki Expo ko inika o maa fo ke ngā hi Talanoa mo hatau kainga tonga o nofo i he hahake loto whakatawange te o wa ule le atu ke tiki mo tolu mo mea mai waha o pe me ho mo le tio wa televisione Pasifika. Malo Lele Nisa Bulavinaka, coming to you live from World Expo 2020 here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. This is Talanoa, together with Pasifika TV and radio. We're absolutely thrilled to be coming to you from Expo and here today to speak to a member of the local Fijian community here in the UAE. And not only that, but one of the workers here who was a soldier before and now working in a drone company. We're going to have a bit of a chat with him today. I'd like to introduce to you and say a big Bulavinaka and a warm welcome to Vilikesa Vatu, Vili Nisambula. Malolele, welcome to Pasifika TV and radio.
Malolele and Bulavinaka Suli, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Look, before we start, I want to give you an opportunity to just quickly introduce yourself formally to our viewers. Let us know where in Fiji you herald from on your mum and dad's side and who you are.
Bulavinaka, Fiji. My name is Vilikesa Vatu. I hail from the village of Nangara in Ono in Kantavu, and my maternal links to Nambualu in Bua in Vanua. Grew up and lived in Namboa in Suva until I moved over to the UK to join the British Army.
Wow.
Until 2015 when I started moving over to Dubai and till today.
Fantastic. So you've been here since 2015, the United Arab Emirates. What kind of work has brought you here to the UAE?
I was fortunate enough to be working with the drone drone industry, and that allowed me to have this work rotation of 2 months of work and 1 month off. That allowed me to stay here in the UAE until today, and it has also helped us as a couple being here. So.
And I would like looking since we've been here, the lifestyle here is quite different from Fiji, a big
Very
difference.
much.
It's a world away from the Pacific Islands. Could you tell us a little bit about what Dubai is like? Because we have a vision when we come from our part of the world that this is the glitz and glam and the bling bling of this part of the world, big high rise, Al Burj. Is it reality? What's the life like here in Dubai?
Dubai, you could say that Dubai is a land of opportunities. There's loads of opportunities, and yes, there's bling blings everywhere, and the lifestyle you have to come to Dubai to witness it. And but as living here for the past few years, it has its the perks of being here in Dubai, and most of it is, yeah, it's a good lifestyle. There's lots of things that you can do here in Dubai.
This part of the world is very rich in natural resources, fossil fuels such as oil and that. And I understand that the cost of fuel is quite cheap here. Could you give us a bit of an overview of how much is fuel to refuel your vehicle here in the UAE? What is the cost of living like here?
The fuel definitely is very much cheap here compared to the UK or even in Fiji. We have a SUV, and to fill up the SUV is approximately 100 dirhams, which is about £20. If I move back to the UK with this SUV, I'd probably be filling it up with 70, 80 pounds of fuel. So it is very much cheap in oil, and yeah, there's just tons of things that.
What about the cost of living here in terms of food, the groceries, and so forth? I mean, we know comparisons, Tonga and the Pacific, Fiji, a lot of things are imported, so it's generally more expensive. But then, I mean, when you come to this part of the world, it's it can be a bit misleading. Are things imported here? How much is the cost of your groceries, your eating out, and that over here?
The cost of living here, especially groceries, is affordable. It is affordable compared to the average salary. Other things like dining out, they can be much expensive, as this place is more of an expat kind of a country where a lot of people go out dining out a lot. It's quite expensive, but to buy groceries and cook for your family at home is very affordable here.
And I know that you're working now you left your military service and you're now working for a drone company. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the kind of work you do? Do you work all in UAE, or do you travel around this region?
I pretty much travel around the world, and especially in Europe. The work I do is pretty similar to what I did in the military. Is more of surveillance and monitoring borders and maritime services. Currently, I'm working with an Austrian company, and what we do is we support EMSA, European Maritime Safety Agency, in some of Europe's borders and fisheries, the maritime surveillance. So prior to this, I was with a UK company, civilian company, private sector. We were doing the same sort of work out in Mali with the United Nations under the MINUSMA program. We did that for about 3 to 4 years before I joined this Austrian company supporting governmental institutes and other organizations in maritime surveillance and information gathering.
Wow. Gosh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? What they're doing, it's fantastic. Now, I know around North Africa, because you mentioned there about maritime surveillance and border protection, and over the northern countries of Africa, which is not too far from here, so countries like Morocco, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, and those nations there, that there has been a lot of migration of African people from other parts in terms of seeking asylum in some of the European nations that you'll probably be working with. Does the drones play a role in that kind of surveillance of people coming and seeking asylum across the Mediterranean to countries like Italy, Cyprus, Malta, and so on?
There are some companies that are involved with this type of migration, especially the south of Spain, along that area. There are a few drone companies that monitor and survey the area, and to the west of France, especially the UK, the English Channel. There's a company also around that area doing those monitoring, and I think it's a good thing to to have because one we hear that a lot of people that are crossing these channels, it's very dangerous, and to have these drones to oversee the crossing. First, it will give them some sort of safety to report back to authorities that this boat is struggling to come across and some support. But then again, we do not know what these government institutes are up to. But I think it's a good thing to monitor this type of situation around, and the drone business is really good for this.
You were saying before our interview that you've spent a little bit of time in Saudi Arabia, which is a neighbouring country to the UAE. And in terms of the development of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, how do the two countries compare in your experience?
I think Dubai cannot be compared to any other city or country. Dubai is so developed. Dubai has a lot of stuff. I was pretty surprised when I arrived in Jeddah with the state of the place, and as I was expecting it to be some sort of like Dubai, but it wasn't. But yeah, it was pretty surprising. It was more underdeveloped compared to Dubai.
You'd have to be amongst a small group, I would presume, of Pacific Island people who work in Europe and travel, like the kind of work you do traveling around this region. Do you come across many of our Pacific people in your work travels through Europe and around the Middle East?
Not in the Middle East. In fact, I met a Fijian in Saudi Arabia.
Wow!
I met a Fijian in Saudi Arabia. He was studying there. We met. He has this Arabic culture in him, because we met and he came up with some gifts and some stuff that he brought, and then he said this is the Arabic culture that we. I was pretty surprised, and I was very grateful and thankful that we met, but mainly around Europe, where there's a vast amount of Fijians around Europe that I've made contact with on my tours and deployments around Europe. But there are other places which I'm scheduled to attend to this year, such as Romania, Denmark, and Iceland. So I'm hoping to connect with more Fijians if they are in these European countries.
Fantastic. And a question often asked is people miss when they travel to different countries from the Pacific is island food, and knowing that our Pacific cuisine is very unique to the Pacific Islands. How have you found that here, living in the Middle East, in the United Arab Emirates? Can you obtain your bongo chips and other Fijian foods, the lovo foods and so on?
Definitely, we take the lovo with us everywhere.
Of course.
Yes, we've had a few lovo here in the UAE. A few families here, especially the Fijian community in Al Ain and Abu Dhabi, organize meetups and these gatherings. A few years back, they had the Pacific Island conference. It was in Al Ain, and there was loads of Pacific Island foods, and especially the umu or the lovo was there. Unfortunately, we still have yet to get some bongos and twisties in the UAE, but hopefully soon.
And what about kava or yangona? We did hear some stories when we first arrived that kava is a limited number of amount of kava allowed to be brought into the country, but then when we arrived, there was not really any sort of customs or quarantine that we noticed on the entry point. But what's your experience with kava? And how to obtain it, or do people drink kava in this part of the world amongst the diaspora community?
Yes, indeed. Wherever there's Fijians, there will be kava. The good thing about Dubai is the amount of things that you can get into Dubai is just unlimited. With kava, you go online and you have businesses in Fiji like Lami Kava. I'm not promoting Lami Kava, but Lami Kava is such a good. They have a good website that you can order and then get into the UAE, which is really good. It's really good, yes. And we have families and relatives who are coming across bringing kava over. And
wow, fantastic.
We never run short of it.
Obviously, you've lived here for a while, so you enjoy living here.
Absolutely, yes. We've enjoyed living here, but I think for the future we might retire somewhere else other than here. But who knows? Only the future holds that.
So in saying that though, is you find that within Dubai this is an expat city? People come in for a season, work hard, make money and always go on? Or do people come and retire here? Do people spend the rest of their life here other than the Emiratis who obviously are from this country?
I've heard a few stories of some families that they have stayed here after working, and then they've retired and they've stayed here. Some of our Fijian friends, they have moved back to Fiji, New Zealand and Australia. I think it's pretty dependent on personal preference. Yeah. I don't know whether I will stay here for retirement or move back to Fiji or the UK, but it really depends. But yeah, there have been some families that have stayed here after their work. Yeah.
What do you miss personally most about Fiji?
Oh, my family. My family, definitely. Being amongst the family is always the climax of being in Fiji, and because you have your cousins to joke with, and you know all these Fijian jokes. No one else would understand other than just your same. Grew up from the same background, and family is always things that I miss.
And have any of those family come to see you, visit you here in the UAE?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
How do you think they'd react if they came here? As a
One
very
day.
very new experience?
It
coming
will
to this
be.
part of the
It will
world?
be. They'll be surprised with what's around here and what to do.
Are there any challenges to living in this part of the world, in the Middle East? Or it seems from what we observed anyway that everyone seems very happy here. It seems that there's nothing that you're short of. The shops are very stocked, and people seem to live a very happy life here. But are there things that we don't see as visitors to this land that under the surface very difficult, you can't obtain, or challenging about living in this part of the world with maybe the weather or the topography of the country?
We have not specifically come through any struggles or any problems with living here. I think the people here, the system here, they really look after you. Even with security and safety, they really do look after the people who are here as expats and locals. So we have yet to come across any struggle to go through with or experience. Other than that, not yet. It would be.
A question that a few people have asked me from overseas is about religion, and I know that most of our people from the Pacific were, from Christian backgrounds and Christian denominations, and the question posed has been that living in Islamic country, is our faith as Christians something that's ever challenged, or is it respected in this part of the world? Is it an issue or not an issue at all?
At the moment, no, not an issue at all. We've had I forgot the place, the name, but they have built a church next to a mosque, and they have welcomed the community of that church to come and build a church next to a mosque, a Catholic church.
Wow.
Yeah. And back in 2018 or 2017 was the year of tolerance. So Dubai, in regards to religion, they do respect other religions, and as long as you respect theirs, they will respect your religion. And yeah, it's been very good.
When coming to a new culture, obviously it's a learning and growth opportunity, but at the same time, we make mistakes, and funny. Sometimes there's some very funny situations where when we're coming to a new culture, we do something that might be culturally inappropriate to that person, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Could you give us an example of a time when you have come across something where perhaps you've been on the wrong end, or something that someone else from this part of the world has maybe done to you, the way they interact with you, that was in Fiji would be culturally inappropriate, but you've just put it down to cultural differences? Have you got any examples to share?
Not very much, except a similar thing to them is it is a taboo to touch someone's head back in Fiji, and for them it's strictly taboo as well. You don't just go up to them and touch your head, but I have not come across anything like that yet. So wouldn't be able to give an example of.
No.
Of it.
How do we greet people in this part of the world? Because I know that I know people shake hands, but there is a local way of greeting people.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. And what does that mean when you're saying assalamu alaikum to somebody?
God be with you.
Right.
And the reply is Malaikum Salam.
Alaikum salam. And I noticed that they often put their hand across their chest
across
as
the
well.
chest.
Yes.
It's a sign of from the heart
Beautiful.
to express that they are actually saying it from their heart. Assalamu alaikum. God
So
be with you.
if I was to walk into a room, we'd be like, and you're a local from here, we put our hand across our heart and say, Assalamu alaikum.
Malaikum Salam.
Beautiful, very, very nice. And what about interacting with people of the opposite sex, women in particular? Is it the same, just put a hand across the chest and greet them, or you do avoid speaking with women if it's not required?
Basically, it is not required to speak to the other gender. Yes, unless it's approved by the male of the family that you can speak to them. Other than that, when you enter a home, a house, they prefer that male interact with male and the female stay in another room or stay. But in modern times now, I think you enter a house now, they will welcome you as a whole family, as a whole.
Nice.
Yeah.
In your interactions with people in the Middle East and overseas, people must be curious where you're originally from. When you say you're from Fiji, do people know Fiji? Are they aware of Fiji, or they have no idea what is Fiji? Or do people think you're from somewhere else in the world?
They think Fiji is from Africa.
Right.
Most of them think Fiji is from Africa. And the only good explanation we can give is Australia and New Zealand, and then
Right.
they know, and then say it's close to them. And then they, oh, okay, Pacific Island? Yes, Pacific Islands.
Wow.
So yeah, majority of the people do not know where Fiji is. So when we tell them where Fiji is, then they have an idea. Obviously, they have an idea of where Fiji is.
And before you say you're from Fiji, is there other countries that guess you look like you're from here or here?
Last night, just getting the taxi to go back home, the taxi driver thought I was from the Philippines.
Wow.
I was like, okay, that's different. But yeah, he thought I was from the Philippines, and then others thought I was from Jamaica
Wow.
or a country in Africa. Like, okay, that's fine.
Wow.
And then when I tell them I'm from Fiji, and then they're so surprised. Some of them have never heard of Fiji.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I guess that's a good segue to my next question, which is about Expo 2020, because this is the largest exposition in human history of 192 countries that have come together, including Fiji and Tonga and many of our Pacific Island countries. What have you observed here? Because this actually does introduce the Emirati people in the world to every country just about on Earth. What do you think of Expo 2020?
I think Expo 2020 is such an amazing event, especially here in Dubai. There's so many small countries that you have never heard of, that you've come and visit here, and then you are aware of their being or where they are. They do exist. Places like a friend of mine said he's never heard of Mali, and then he found out the other day that there is a country called Mali. And Burkina Faso, never heard of Burkina Faso. And there's this African country, Burkina Faso. And it's also a good exposure for our small island nations, such as Fiji, Tonga, Samoa. People from Europe and other continents, they have never heard of these small Pacific islands, even Palau. And they've come to see the pavilion, and they've come to attend our national days, and they've seen our culture and our different cultures, and which is a really good thing and a really good event.
Our Pacific community here is mostly Fijians. We've got a strong community, Samoan, Tongan, and maybe some of our other Pacific neighbours. Roughly, if you were to take an estimate, just in your own observations, how many roughly Pacific Island people live permanently here in the UAE? Are we talking thousands, hundreds, or under 50? Roughly, how many would you estimate live in Dubai?
I think it's about in the hundreds.
Wow.
In the hundreds, majority would be Fijians. There's a few Tongan community. The Tongan community is growing pretty slowly. The Samoan, there's a few Cook Islanders. In the hundreds.
And what brings them to the United Arab Emirates? What are the key industries that our Pacific people work in?
I think most of them work in aviation and tourism. These are the two key industries that our friendly smiles have brought ourselves into the UAE.
So good.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on today about the lifestyle here in UAE that you think would be very interesting or a point of difference for our Pacific viewers watching from Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, and from around the world?
I think the main thing here in Dubai is the tourism industry. The tourism industry is a vast majority of island resorts and hotels. And if there's someone in the Pacific Islands with the friendly smiles who like to come to Dubai, tourism industry is such a wide open industry here in Dubai that people can come and work in. If you want to come to Dubai and see the luxurious place of Dubai, the tourism industry is a booming industry here in Dubai.
So good. Vili, I want to give you a chance to say a shout out to your family in Fijian, Vosa Vakaviti, or whichever language you're comfortable saying it to. But if you want to have a look in our camera there, I'm sure you have family that haven't seen you for a long time back in beautiful Fiji. Maybe they're living in the UK or around the world. But I want to give you a chance to say a few words in Fijian or whichever language you're comfortable with to your family and friends.
Malo. Bulu menaka, dosa bulu menaka na cikume viti, do bulu menaka masalah no sorry, do bulu menaka no itang do bulu menaka tiku pakatal ngakin na kem do na be ertoro tiku me New York, be kem do ken sarana tiku me Ingilandi, na bako no ni menaka na bulu menaka, pamimbi berto na Leeds na tiku me Lakil, do bulu menaka no itang ni bulu menaka tiku, bulu menaka ke tiku, sapa no ni binasar tiga ni kena lolo melebu kena masu mai nandel ni benu ku Dubai
Vinaka sala vakalevu me vakalonga tataki iko nakalo. And so it's such an honor to have you here, Vili, on our program. Thank you for giving up your time to chat with us. We've learned a lot about the UAE. We've learned a lot about our Pacific family that live here. And we want to encourage all of our Pacific people, if you ever have the opportunity to visit Dubai, probably not Expo because it's going to be over in a couple of weeks' time. It's just about done. But please make the journey over to Dubai. And if you want to connect with our Pacific community, Vili is one of our Fijian faces here in the UAE. And there's many, many more, in the hundreds, as he said, working. Who knows whether you might be on Emirates Airlines and have maybe a Tongan flight attendant or a Fijian flight attendant looking after you on the flight. But thank you so much, Vili, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and look forward to catching up with you again. Hopefully one day we'll come back through the UAE once again.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We've been chatting to Vilikesa Vatu, one of the members of our Fijian diaspora here locally in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. He's here at Expo with us today, and it's been an absolute pleasure hearing more on our program Talanoa about the lifestyles here of our people, our Pacific people, who call Dubai home, even if it's a temporary home here in the Middle East. Thank you so much for tuning in. From all of us here at Talanoa, malo opito mo mea mai. Have a great day, Vinaka, and Nisa Modemanda.
You said you're doing well, it'll be all I had. And then it's just been like hell, guess I'm only thinking that you ain't moved on. But I never thought you'd forget me so fast.
I'm always on 48.
Kuna lahi he whakatu ako koe ni pe mo Digicel International. Ave ai topa pangai wanoa, prepaid bundle pe koe talafisalini ki ho family pe e huhohi ngoa ki lulu ki kuna ai Samsung Galaxy Flip Z pe S21 pe koe pare pa angai uang iau he wika kotoa pe. Ki hao whainga maari ke ikuna pe ke ngawe aki e Digicel International app pe koe digicilinternational.com pe ahia e whanakoloa. Whitu taki ma au pe mho kāinga aki ho ave ai topa prepaid bundle pe talafisalini e ahoni.